Welcome to this episode of the Formula Podcast. I'm your friendly neighborhood host, Trevor Carlson. On this episode, I'm sitting down with film director Noura Kevorkian, and we're going to be talking about her Peabody Award-winning film, Batata. It's also up for an Academy Award, so it's really just a phenomenal story where this documentary has been worked on for over 10 years. It's a story of a Syrian family that just starts out as regular potato farmers, and you get to kind of follow their story during the Syrian revolution and what happens after that. I just think that this whole story behind the film is crazy. This is probably one of the most fascinating and impressive projects I've ever seen, and I hope that you get a little bit out of the interview with Noura and you have the chance to go see Batata for yourself. I'm not going to ramble on any further, so without further ado, let's get on with the show with Noura Kevorkian. All right, today on the show, I have Noura Kevorkian, the director behind Batata. This story behind Batata is just fascinating. Like, you spent 10 years on this film. It wasn't intended to be what it eventually became. And now it's been rolled out. It's winning awards all over the world. It won the Peabody Award. Tell me, like, how did this film started in the first place, and what was like the original idea behind the film?
Batata, which is the title of the film, means potato in Arabic. So originally, the film started in 2009 as a film about potato farmers, Syrian potato farmers who were migrant workers, came from Syria to Lebanon to work on the Lebanese land, planting potatoes. And I wanted to explore the political relationship between these two Arab countries, Lebanon and Syria. And I was born in Syria. My mom is Syrian. Lebanon, where I grew up, is my country, and my dad is Lebanese. So it was supposed to be this interaction between two Arab people, countries who don't like each other, but they need each other, and the politics of the Lebanese civil war, all told through the potato fields and this charismatic woman named Maria. This is how the film started in 2009. And before I finished the film, the Syrian revolution started. And I grew up in Lebanon during the Lebanese civil war, and I wasn't scared of the revolution. I thought, there's always problems happening in the Middle East, and this is nothing. And we all assumed that it was going to be 2, 3, 4 months, and it'll be over, because everybody knew that Bashar al-Assad would never fall, based on the history of what had happened. Sadly, it turned out to be true. But anyway, so I decided to follow another 3, 4 months to cover the Syrian revolution. As any director would do, documentary director, follow twists and turns in their stories. But then what happened is that the revolution turned to civil war. And by that time, I had already spent 3 years with my characters. I cared for them. And I love Maria, and there were little kids that I cared for, and I thought, I can't just drop the story, pack, and go back home to my own children who were little. So I made a commitment to following their lives until the day they would pack their bags and go home to Syria. But at the time, I didn't know that this was going to be a 13-year saga. So it went on and on. Every year I went 2, 3 months twice, all the way from Canada back to Lebanon, hung out in the refugee camps, lived with them on and off, and I filmed their lives. And so I was still filming after 10 years. And in March of 2020, the coronavirus, when the pandemic happened, I was forced to stay in a lockdown and ended up staying in Toronto and editing the 500 plus hours of footage, and which became the film Batata. And so we released it into the world. and you know that it's submitted to the Oscars for consideration for feature documentary. It won a Peabody. It went around the world in festivals. So I'm very happy with the film, the success of the film. But I'm still following the lives of Maria and everyone else in the camp who is still stuck there after 13 years.
So it sounds like it started out, as you said, you were just doing this film on the potato farmers, and then it turned into this completely other thing that has spanned 13 years, which is, that's, to me, it's just like a crazy, crazy amount of time to spend on a single film or a single project.
My daughter was 8 weeks old when I started this film. I was wearing her on my chest in a baby Bjorn, and I have a 3-year-old son that I carried, and we went together to start filming Batata, the original story. And now she's 14 years old. So her entire life, my kid's entire life, has been the story of Batata. In fact, my daughter has made a little 2.5 minute French intro of Batata, because when we couldn't go to the festivals, they would put that as the introduction, and it shows her from being born all the way now. Is her entire, our family's life is part of this film. And the only reason I did this commitment, because my dad is a refugee. He was born in a refugee camp in Lebanon, and my entire family's heritage, the Armenian heritage, is all about refugees, about massacres, about Armenian genocide, about displacement. And, we're still not back in our ancestral homeland in in Turkey, in Marash. So it's part of my history's legacy, story. I totally connect, and it's important for me to tell other people's refugee stories. So I committed to it because it means a lot to me, and I don't want to see that in the world. And sadly, right now, it's happening every day. There are new refugees in the world. And right now, what's happening in Gaza is heartbreaking. And what's happened before to the Armenians of Artsakh, who packed up their home and went to Armenia, it's just really a big part of our lives.
It seems like I don't I don't know what happened before, like, before the 90s and 2000s, but it didn't seem like the older I get, it seems like it's becoming a more and more prevalent thing with conflicts in different regions and things like that. Maybe it's just with the news, people are just finding out about it more. Maybe it was still happening before, but with the 24-hour news cycle and social media. One question I have is that with the refugee situations happening in different countries, and like you said, it's been kind of a big part of your life, even like your parents' lives. People who maybe haven't been exposed or haven't experienced some of the things that you have or seen the things that you have, is there something, and maybe it's part of the message of Batata, is like what's like one message you would like to communicate to to people who haven't experienced them, to maybe get them to understand or see things the way that you do?
Well, I'd say to the audience is that try to go see the film Batata, because it's a very unique film. It gives the audience an opportunity to feel and understand what it means to be a refugee. It is a very unique film because you get to meet human beings like us, everyday human beings who are working to support their families. And all of a sudden, political events happen and their life goes upside down. They become refugees, they live in tents, and you get to see how they eat, how they sleep, how they work, what they love, how they get married. It is a slice of life that is inaccessible to majority of the people in the world. The fact that I was there with my camera in a small tiny tent in a refugee camp for 10 years with them all the time, filming, watching as babies are born, as they grow up, little girls grow up and get married, you get to see it. And that makes you realize that these refugees that we hear on the media, oh, there's so many refugees, they cross the border, da da da. You realize that they're actually people just like us. They have amazing amount of stuff that people have, that they have to leave in their home and pack their bag and run away. That fancy thing that they bought, the dress, the shoes, the wedding pictures, they left everything behind and ran away. I always tell people, imagine right now, wherever you're sitting and listening to me, take a second and look around. Look around at all the stuff you have that has meaning for you. Your grandfather's, I don't know, picture, your mother's pillow, all the things. Imagine you have a couple of minutes, bombs are falling, you have to pack yourself and go. Right, leave everything behind and go. Grab your children, and on the way you could lose some of your family members to bombing, and then you have to go in a tent city, sit on the floor in freezing conditions. You have no idea what's happening to your future. Are you ever going to go home? Where are your kids going to be? Are they going to have school? You have no idea. And imagine living like that for 13 years. And Palestinians have been living like that for 60 plus years. And the Armenians have been living that for, like, it is unfathomable concept that we hear in the news, and we just turn the channel or we go back doing our stuff because we can't handle it. So I tell people, go see Batata and don't be worried that it will be a sad, depressing film. It is not. In fact, everyone comes out of the film full of hope and understanding, and they are in awe of this ability of people to connect to each other, to help each other. And Maria being this amazing warrior woman who could do stuff. So it's a really great experience to see this film. So I'm hoping that people will get a chance to access the film, because right now it's really difficult to access it, especially in the States. I think only Academy members can vote, watch it on the voting channels. It's not accessible anywhere else. So as a filmmaker who dedicated this much time to this subject, my wish is that somehow it miraculously it'll be available for people to see it. And that's why we make films.
It's something that I experienced when I was traveling around. Is I felt that the places where people, and it's kind of like a bittersweet thing, but the places where people had gone through the most, like the people where stuff had been really bad in like the recent future, I just found everyone there to be like the most hospitable and the most friendly and the most like
That's
helpful.
right.
I have a theory that it's because, because of whatever they've gone through, maybe it's in a way it's made them, I don't know exactly why, but maybe it's, you know what I'm saying?
I totally understand. Yeah, I grew up in I was born in Syria. I grew up in a few years. I lived in Beirut, the capital of Lebanon, where my dad is from. And then as a young girl, we moved to this little village called Anjar in the Bekaa Valley in Lebanon. In fact, I filmed Batata. The film is very close to the village where I grew up, where my mom and family still live. So that village, I made a film about that called Anjar Flowers, Goats and Heroes. It's about all the survivors in this 4,000 people village who are all collectively survivors from the Armenian genocide 1915 committed by the Ottoman Turks. So they all ended up surviving and coming to that village. And there was that sense in the village of people experiencing collective trauma, collective problems. They kind of have this collective understanding. They're stronger together. They're more hospitable. They're more understanding. I totally know that because I grew up there. And I think that has made the person that I am because of all the experiences of listening to stories. I'm a collector of stories. I absorb and archive stories, and I felt the same thing during the Lebanese civil war when I was growing up. When you experience that kind of war and trauma, you connect to people, and their connection is very strong. And in the refugee camp too, where I spent 10 years filming. And I can say that the Syrians in Lebanon, in the refugee camp, they're so hospitable. They have hardly any food. If they had 2 cups of tea, they would offer you one. and you're like, oh my gosh, you guys are starving, but
Mhm.
they welcome you with big smiles and they give you tea, and they're so exactly what you're describing.
Mhm.
And sometimes I don't see that here in the West,
Yeah.
very, very, very
I read something about this it was a book written in like the 30s or 40s. It said that this was kind of happening in the countries who were wealthier, as everyone was kind of getting their own stuff, so they didn't want to. You weren't like going to your neighbor's house, and everyone wasn't going together to watch like the game or whatever together.
mhm,
Everyone was getting
mhm.
their own, so you kind of wanted to. You became more
Yeah.
individualistic. But I guess when, like you're saying, when you go through something challenging, then you're used to helping each other out. You kind of become a stronger community.
It's
So,
It's a very good example of what we went through in the world with the pandemic. Is that's when that
mhm,
was a collective trauma for everyone, and we all experienced it together, and it brought people together. There's lot of empathy, a lot of understanding, helping each other. All came because we experienced it together. So that's the closest example we can have in the West, where, or if there's a murder in a community, everyone comes together. There's a fire in the community. That's our human nature. And
mhm,
so that's why I think stories that matter, like they say in the Peabody, right? Stories that matter really is important. Documentaries to give people that sense, because we can't experience it. The audiences can't experience that in real life. But when you go to the theater or you watch the film, you get to experience that experience of taking the journey of 10 years with the characters, and understanding their emotional, physical, and actual journey, and it connects to them. And I get emails and social media, people find me everywhere, messages that are make me teary-eyed. Is like how they totally finally understood what it means to be refugee, and they care about Maria. They understand things, and it's really fulfilling for me, and it's really makes me happy that it's doing what it's supposed to do.
Now that you're saying that, I'm thinking like I'm starting to brainstorm all the people I know that could have screenings and things like that wherever they are. One of the questions I wanted to ask you was, right now, I think as a like the world is kind of seeing the Palestinian crisis, like what's going on there, and a lot of people are wondering like, what can I do? Like I see that there's things that aren't good happening. I see that people are suffering, and I know that like the refugee, like there's more going to be more refugees that come out of this, that whole situation. Like what can like what would you tell like the average person to do to like to help, whether it's I don't know. I'll leave that up to you because that's a question I have sometimes as well. When you see these things happening, like what can you do?
Well, I mean, immediate reaction would be these people need help, financial support. There are organizations, NGOs that collect money to help them, right? But I think that's a temporary solution. I think as human beings, we are at a point right now where we have to understand that we are so advanced in our intellect, in our technology, and we have to come to a point where we have to realize that the resources on the face of the earth are limited. The amount of resources that are blowing up, bombs, machinery, war efforts, they are destroying the earth and destroying each other. I mean, we have to figure out a way to stop the nonsense and find a way to help each other as human beings, to put aside the religious ideologies. It's just really in the basic human thing is humanity, love, support every single person, no matter where they come from, what religion they are. They're all the same. They need a nice, comfortable home to live in, love, grow their children. That's really the basic things. And when you spend that much time in a refugee camp, you realize that's the most important thing, to have security, safety, running water, love. We don't need all these other things that people are killing each other for. Who needs all these materialistic, capitalistic things? People's perspective have to change. And for that, you need to educate yourself, reading, understanding, and I don't know, voting for the right people who are going to be our leaders. I'm going to
Yes.
end there because I don't want this to be political lecture. I really
Mhm.
think, I really want, uh, I really hope that people will get a chance to see Batata, learn and understand what it feels like to be a refugee, and try and find their humanity and trying to help each other. Really,
Yeah.
that's all.
One part of it that I think that the movie does is when you turn on the news, it's like, oh, there's a million refugees, there's a million refugees here, and but those refugees have names. Like they're people. When you just kind of like put that, when they put the big label on them, it makes it like, oh, well, it's not the same as if you're like if you know somebody, if you've sat at a table with them, if you've had tea with them, if you've been to their house, and then now they're a refugee. That's a different feeling than if you just turn on the TV and then they're like,
Exactly,
in the very,
exactly. That's what
yes.
I'm saying is that when people watched Batata, the film Batata, they would get to know Maria, the main character of the film, and
Mhm,
get to know every single person in the film with a first name, get to see what they do, how they wear, how they think, how they dance at a wedding. And that gives you the understanding, and that concept of, oh, they're refugees, disappears, because then you are in the same level of a human being who just happens to live in a different part of the world or speaks a different language, right? And
mhm.
I think that's the success of the film, that it touches all the audiences. It's been going around the world in the last year and a half. It's been pretty much to so many festivals. It won human rights awards, couple of them. And we mentioned all the other awards and the Academy, all this. So that's what it's doing. It's touching people's hearts, and that's why I think it's a successful film.
Yeah.
And we'll see where it will go. So
Fingers crossed. I'm hoping that you get some good news that it's been nominated for the Academy. Yes,
because
I think
that
that
it
if an
would be great for me, great for the film, but it would be amazing for the refugees
Mhm,
to finally have people vote for a film that is really about them, and that people
yeah.
haven't forgotten about that. I think
Mhm.
there would be party in the refugee camp.
So in the movie, like you spent 10 years making it, and there just has to be, I mean, there's so much footage that probably didn't even make it in the final
That's right.
cut.
A lot of
I,
footage.
I just can't even imagine. And the amount of time it probably took you to edit it was probably
Hmm.
just a
Hmm.
big commitment of its own. But I'm wondering if there's a piece of the film or a scene, whether it got included in the final version or not, something that was like really meaningful and special to you. Like, do you have a part that when you're thinking of the film, you just think of this as like this was like my absolutely favorite moment. It
Oh,
was heart
it's like
touching and
asking.
fun.
I know what you're asking, but I think it's like asking a mother, which child do you prefer more? It's not an impossible question to answer, because I did everything on the film, right? And it was part of the reason for that is because there was no other way for me to film. There's no the refugee camp is so small, the tents are so tiny that you can't bring in a crew. It was just me with my camera sitting at a corner trying to blend in. And if you see when you see the film, you realize no one looks at my camera, which is that's why it's cinema verite, because it took forever for them to get used to me. And I was like the furniture in the tent, right? And uh, because I did so much, I spent so much time with them that I care for everybody and all the stories. And so when it came time for me to edit the film, I spent 2 years editing by myself during the lockdown. And it was very emotional for me. sometimes for the sake of the story, I had to, kill our darlings or cut down this scene, cut down that character. And literally it for me, I almost had to cry or, take time to do that, because when you cut a scene with a person out of a movie, it's like they don't exist anymore in the real world, because you audiences, we never get to know that character, and so you almost kill them, right? They're almost dead. And for me to accept that and understand that for the better of how long am I going to make my film? I cannot make it 500 hours. So it was very hard. And there are lots of characters in the film that they had to go, because then I wanted the film to be very objective. It had to be, balanced in terms of sad things and happy things. I didn't want it to be just sitting there and crying. And, it would be counterproductive. So there was a character in the film who's a niece who was going through cancer treatment. Can you imagine being in a refugee camp and going back and forth in the war to get chemo treatments? I mean, that's heartbreaking. And as much as I loved her, I had to cut that story out. And There's so many other stories about a little child who basically went deaf in the explosions in Homs, sorry. All this stuff. But that's part of being a good storyteller, is to know what to keep and what not to keep and who to focus on, because the ultimate goal is for the audiences to love the film, to connect to the character, and don't want the film to finish, which it looks like I succeeded. So the sacrifices were worth it.
It wasn't just this family. It was like you were pretty much full of an entire community for this 10-year period. So you're seeing kind of life unfold. I think that's one thing that maybe is like for like a listener that might think that might be important to understand, is like, or just anybody seeing the news now, it's like life doesn't stop because you become like a refugee. Like life is still going to
That's
continue.
right.
They're still going to get married, have kids, go to school,
Exactly.
um,
Exactly.
get
That's why.
yeah.
Sorry. That's why my partner is a producer in Canada. He's like a very experienced, one of the best producers in Canada, and he helped me with the film. His name is Paul Scherzer. He's very creative, and he calls it Boyhood for Syrian Refugees. The movie Boyhood, right? So
Yes.
I'm like, well, it's a bit more than Boyhood, because it's more than 7 years and we're still filming. I'm still filming because of exactly what you said. Because how can you stop filming the lives of people that you spent 10 years with, and audiences have spent 10 years watching them, and they're still stuck in a refugee camp? And there is no end. There's no, you can't close that chapter. The book is still open. They're still refugees. They're still in the mud as I speak to you. Maria is caring for her parents in a tent, freezing cold. There's not enough. Lebanon is in a hyperinflation. Banking system has collapsed. There's no jobs. Like, it's a mess there, and you can't end the story. And I really, what I'm doing now, it's almost becoming like a sociology research into the life of people who are refugees, because we started before they became refugees, and now we're continuing. It's almost like a study that's gonna happen, that's being captured on film, and we will see what happens in the next 5 years, 10 years. I don't know. I was at a
Yeah.
award ceremony, and I said, I'm hoping it won't be 30 years, because I don't know if I can keep working that long following their lives. And for all their own sake, I hope that it will end soon, because I would love to film that scene, everyone packing their bags and going to Syria.
I think everyone who sees the movie will hope that there's a part two where it's just like them going home.
Yeah.
You've put 10 years. You said you can't turn off the camera yet. From from an outsider's perspective, I feel like there's like two parts of it. Like one of it, part of me relates to you, and I'm like, yeah, I wouldn't want to turn the camera off and stop the story until the story's done. But then there's a part of me that also feels like that almost it would take a toll a little bit. Like,
Hmm.
so I'm wondering what keeps you going? Like,
Good question.
why do you keep turning the camera on?
Good question. It's like, how do I balance my personal life, my mental, emotional well being with continuing to film a very difficult subject matter like this?
Hmm.
I think I touched a little bit about my upbringing. I carry with me the collective trauma of the people, Armenian people, my family's people, rape, murder, genocide, all this. I already grew up with that in my own family. And when we lived in this little village in Anjar, I absorbed all the stories of the elders. It was all about displacement, genocide. And then when I was a child, the Lebanese civil war started, and I experienced violence and trauma in being there with bombs falling, going down to shelters, being terrified of dying, all that stuff. So I already have all that in me. And then so I came to Canada to, start a new life. And I'm losing the train of thought where I was going with this. Yeah. So I really care
It's
about
okay.
all this. This is something that is my life. I've always been thinking about other people's stories, putting myself in their shoes. So it's very hard for me to detach myself from Maria and all these refugees, because I know what it is to be a child thinking, oh, in America, all the teenagers, all the young people, 8-year-olds are 9-year-olds are like happily going to birthday parties, and we are dying here. No one cares about us. I've had that thought as a child. So, so I know how they feel in the refugee camp. And I really don't want to be that Western person who's going to a birthday party not caring for them. So it's like I can't stop myself, but I know the toll is paid for me is that physically, emotionally, mentally I'm exhausted. I had funding for 1.5 to 2 years for a film, and I had to stretch it 12 years. And the re-traumatization for me was tough, being in a refugee camp and seeing people dying and hearing the bombs falling on Damascus, all these things. I'm still paying for that emotional, physical re-traumatization. It's been very tough for me, but this I'm continuing filming, but I'm trying to protect myself a little bit more now, because I am a mother. I have children who need me, and I've already left them enough long times. I don't want to do that again. So I want to do this time a little bit differently and ask for help and have some local groups who would go and film for me, because now I've already set things in motion, and the refugees are so comfortable with the camera that they could work with it, right? So I'm
Yeah.
hoping that I could do it a little differently, so I don't have to constantly travel, because that was very, very hard for me. But also, I have other projects. My partner is a producer and he has other projects, and I have my own project. Like our next project that we are in development right now, and hopefully we go to camera in April, May. It's about an amazing Canadian woman who's this strong, charismatic woman who was born in 1912, and she's deceased now. Her name is Ethel Mulvaney, and it's really the story is about her life story of how this woman who was neurodivergent but lived through the bipolar condition, and managed to live this bigger than life experience by herself, unmarried, without chaperone. Ended up in Singapore, ended up in Japan, met the emperor, had a big life, fell in love, married, and ended up in prison in Changi as a prisoner of war. And there she became a leader. She helped people, she encouraged them, And towards the end, she ended up helping save the lives of 400 women and children. Liberation
Wow.
happened. She came back to Canada. So I am very, very much attracted to people who are strong and have a
Hmm.
focus and do something with their life. And so Maria, the main character of Batata, is like that. And now Ethel Mulvaney is like that. And so I'm kind of obsessed with her now. She's an amazing woman and she's inspiring. I shouldn't say obsessed, like I find her inspiring.
Mm.
And so I'm telling her story. It's a feature documentary to start because her life is very dramatic. It's gonna be probably like our second step would be a drama series about her life. But right now, I really want to start it with a feature documentary, because I have 15 hours of her voice audio interviews, and I'm going to use her
Hmm.
audio interviews to tell her life posthumously, and reenactments and archives that we have to tell her fascinating story, because she is a Canadian war hero and she needs to be celebrated for that.
It seems like you're able to find, I'm curious, well, you're able to find these amazing people that and you're able to tell their story. And I'm sure that this, like, she sounds like a phenomenal woman. I'm very excited to at some
Yeah.
point in time in the future to see that film too. How do you, so as a filmmaker and storyteller, how do you come up with, well, how can I phrase this? Because I think there's a lot of people out there that want to tell good stories and they want to highlight things that they care about. So I guess this is a two-part question. It's how do you find and kind of come up with your own stories and find people like this that you want to highlight? And then if somebody else is looking to do the same with somebody they've met, a story they've heard, what advice do you have to them? Like, how would you advise them to go about doing that?
I mean, being a documentary filmmaker is a very big commitment. It is not easy. If you are looking for fame and money, it's totally the wrong career for you. There is no anything fancy or money in documentary filmmaking. I would say that for the last 20 years that I've been making films, it is not that. So it's for people who really have a passion to tell stories that matter. So if you can find a story that resonates with you in your heart, in your soul, you care about that. And it is you're telling that story for the right reasons, then definitely go for it. It has to be something you care about, because it shows on the screen if you care about it or you just did it
Hmm.
to deliver something to TV station. It totally shows. Yeah, so follow your heart and be prepared. I think my advice would be prepared from the beginning to expect what the toll is going to be on you. I mean, not every documentary film is difficult, traumatizing or difficult subject. It could be like, it'd be great to make a documentary about like an amazing musician. There's no trauma in there. But I'm just saying, like, be prepared from the beginning as to how much is the toll, meaning could be financial, time wise, away from your children. If you're going to follow a musician around the world, how much time are you going to be away from your kids? Can you handle that? How is it going to? You have to think about these things, because the inherent, sorry, there's a raccoon outside. We're in Toronto. There's an
That's funny.
inherent solitude in documentary filmmaking, but it's inherent surprise as well, because you don't know where the story is going to go. Just like Batata, it was supposed to be 2 years, ended up to be 12. So when you prepare yourself for that, then you have a plan and you have support system. And if you're dealing with difficult subjects, you need the support system. You need this, I don't know, friends to talk to, someone's shoulder to cry on, a psychologist, hopefully psychiatrist, somebody that would give you advice and listen to you depending on your subject and what you're doing. That would be the biggest advice, because I did none of that. And now I
Hmm.
look back, I'm like, oh, I wish I had.
Hmm.
Uh, so that would be my advice.
Yeah, I think that's probably not what most people would expect because, they'd probably be thinking like, oh, this is how you frame the story and all that. But you're like, no, you just have to take care of yourself in the process.
Yeah, definitely. Because if you're feeling healthy, you don't have pain. And your mind is well, you don't have, like I suffer from complex PTSD. It's part of my childhood traumas and part of re-traumatizing the over this. So if you don't have to suffer from these things, or you're physically healthy, mentally healthy, everything's fine, it's much easier to imagine how you're going to tell the story, or worry about which genre am I going to use, or how I'm going to put the camera, and how I'm going to edit. Those become much easier. But people
Hmm.
usually don't talk about the other difficult stuff. But, finally, we are at a place in the world where people are talking about mental health. And I don't think we would have done that even 5 years ago. Nobody would mention that.
Yeah.
So we are moving to a shift right now. And for women, I think I would add extra advice is that depending on where you're working as a woman, you have to have different safety protocols in place, depending on your working conditions, right? And as a
Yeah.
mother, you also have to uh, put in some financing plans to be able to take care of childcare. I carried my baby with me to the refugee camp. I was filming hanging a baby here and running back and forth with my mother's house to nurse my child. So if you plan for that earlier, you might have some budget to have a help with you, someone who can bring you the baby, you nurse them, and they go back, and you can continue filming. This kind of
I
stuff.
mean, just that planning ahead. I feel because I've been thinking of getting into working on getting into filmmaking, and that's not even something that comes up is when you're like, oh, I want to make a film. You don't really think about the impact that it's going to have on you or the people around you. Like I'm engaged, starting a family sometime soon. Like if I'm going to make this grand documentary that requires traveling to all these different places, like what impact is that going to have on my spouse, on my kids? How am I going
On
to
your
manage
bank
all that?
account.
Yes, that too. Uh, yes, all those things. So I think that's really good advice. And so I know we're running a little tight on time, so I wanted to ask you two quick questions. One was if Maria was on the show or the family was on the show, what do you think that they would like what's like one message that you think that they would want to share with like with like the audience that's uh hopefully going to watch Batata sometime soon?
Well, uh, you know, Maria always says that we're just like you. We are the same people. We are similar people. I'm a woman whose dream is to get married and have a family. My dream is to have a nice, comfortable life. My dream is to go home to my country, live in my own country. And so, it's people to realize that these refugees are just people like us. We are all the same. And she would say, please go watch Batata and get to see how we live, and don't forget us. Because really, sometimes they feel that people forget them. They're like, oh, yeah, the news cover about Syrian refugees, all these things that happened. And now we don't talk about them because we have, sadly, other refugees to talk about. Other horrible things are happening. So they feel that they're being forgotten. And I keep telling her, like, I'm not going to let you be forgotten, because the film is doing that, is reminding people of your story and all the rest stories of refugees. And now we're still are hopeful that the academy votes that are starting soon, that somebody would vote for us, and hopefully we will get successful, hopefully we get nominated. And then that means people would know about you and they would want to watch your film. So don't give up hope. That's what I tell her. In fact,
Yeah.
I have to call her later today. She's expecting a reply that she texted me earlier. So I will tell her the same thing. I have to keep her
Yes.
strong.
It sounds like you guys you both support each other in the whole process of promoting the film. Well, not promoting the film, but promoting the story. And and
Yeah.
making sure that the word gets out about these stories. Okay, last thing. This is probably, I don't know if this is the most important question, but it is an important one. How can somebody listening to this, how can they best support you, or best support Batata or the refugees that you work with?
Well, there's two ways to help. What, three ways? One is spread the word about Batata and send it out to people so they hear about the film and they know that we are an Oscar contender. Um, Second is I have set up a GoFundMe campaign to raise funds so that I could continue filming the second installment of Batata, continuing like so there's always, I would love to get donations for that because it's a very long-term process doc that I have to finance. And the third is anytime of financial contributions to Maria directly to them, if people want to send money cash to her directly, or to donate to refugee organizations, NGOs through UNHCR or other places to donate. If someone wants to send directly money to Maria, they can get in touch with me. I can give them her information. They can send it with Western Union and she can pick it up. Or we can do a collection, which I usually do to cut down the costs for transfers and banking, and they can send me e-transfers and I do a lump sum and send it to camp.
If there's a link or something along, like some way that they can get in contact with you, I can
Sure.
just add that in the show
Sure.
notes if they want to send money directly, or the link to the GoFundMe. Yes. And we'll make sure that even though we don't have a big audience, hopefully there are some people out there that do decide to contribute through watching this interview. And I just want to say that I think that everything that you shared and everything that the stories that you're telling and sharing, kind of bringing light to like the life of refugee and the work that you've put in is really extraordinary. And I think it's something that a lot of people who do want to become storytellers are like, it's very aspirational, like it's very inspiring for them. So yeah, I applaud you on your work, and I hope that
Thank you.
Batata Chapter 2 comes out soon, and sooner than later, and it's a very happy ending.
Thanks for checking out this episode of the Formula Podcast. I hate asking for this, but if you don't mind, if you could leave us a quick review on Spotify, iTunes, whatever app you're watching or listening this on, that'd be great. It helps people like you find the show, helps me know that our message and the things I'm sharing are helping, and you're learning some stuff from it. It's beneficial to your life in some way. Let me know what you've learned or taken away from these 100+ episodes we've done so far. And, if you have any ideas for anything else you'd like to hear. But thank you for taking the time to listen. Super appreciate you, and enjoy the rest of your day. See you next time. Ciao.